isn't China already the superpower? I mean, how do you define a superpower? Its the economy, at least in its telling, is bigger than America's. It has at least publicly, the unity of lots of states with China. Now, there are certainly questions about that. China hasn't fought a war since 1975 when it helped support Vietnam. So it is fighting a war and having lots of equipment is not necessarily the same thing. I mean, again, Russia highlighted this, that yes, okay, it's fought in the Donbass, it's fought against the Georgian army, and I don't want to be disrespectful to the Georgian army, but it was very Sovietized in 2008. It fought in Syria against terrorists. It wasn't a standing army, it was guerrillas. Yes, you could argue they did perhaps a better job than the Americans in Afghanistan, but nevertheless, it was largely air support that Russia provided in Syria. So it wasn't, again, two armies standing against one another, as you would expect if, let's say, Russia was to attack NATO. But who knows, regarding Donald Trump. But anyway, I digress. So yes, China has a lot of material, but material can be destroyed quite quickly if you don't know how to use it. Also, in terms of the alliances, China, particularly in its neighborhood, has certain perceptions about its dominance and that others should accept Chinese dominance. I'm thinking the Philippines, Vietnam, the 10 dash line that China has invented in the South China Sea that apparently makes it all Chinese. So these are the things. Whether China can actually buy love remains to be seen. Donald Trump is doing his utmost, it seems, to destroy any alliances that America has created. Europe remains sycophantic to America, for better or worse, but in regards to the close ties that were being developed between America and India, Donald Trump has done his utmost to set a bonfire under those, and at the moment seems to be telling Asian allies, you're either with us or against us, which doesn't play well to the Japanese and the South Koreans and the Philippines as well. So we'll have to wait and see as to whether China can actually pick those countries up, less so the South Koreans and the Chinese and the Japanese, but maybe it can do, if Sarah Duterte comes back to power in the Philippines, can get the Philippines back on side, at least nominally. So we'll have to wait and see, but I wouldn't say that China is a superpower yet in terms of its ability, one, militarily, we simply don't know, but also in terms of shaping global norms and values. America has been able to do that, for better or worse, since at least the end of the Cold War, and some would argue since before then, since the end of the Second World War. China hasn't been able to do that yet, and hasn't brought countries in on what it wants to do. China is very much at the moment wanting to keep the global order, but also to have a greater say on it. Autocrats don't generally like alliances because it means that they lose some sovereignty. So Putin, Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un, yes, they don't like, especially Putin and Kim Jong-un, don't like the international order that's rules-based and based on Pax Americana, although that's weakening significantly. So they don't want that in terms of an international order. China does. China has done well. Yes, it doesn't want the Pax Americana, it would like a Pax Americana Sinica, where China has the same sort of say, but it's actually done relatively well out of these current international norms and values and wants to maintain that system. It's why when you come to the BRICS, Russia has been talking about de-dollarization, ending the Western control of international organizations, breaking the Anglo-Saxon media. China has said no every single time, that it doesn't want that because it's done well out of the current international order. It just wants to be treated a bit more fairly, understandably perhaps, and that's something that America and Europe are going to have to deal with. North Korea is a Stalinist dictatorship. It's by itself in many respects, and I'm sure the Russians will drop North Korea as quickly as they picked it up. They needed help against the Ukrainians if the war was to end tomorrow, which I think is unlikely. I'm fairly certain Putin will forget where Pyongyang is and move on. So, I don't necessarily think that, yes, these autocrats these three autocracies are going to form an alliance. certainly not with North Korea. China and Russia, they'll talk a good game, but they distrust each other. There is still a lot of talk in the Kremlin, it comes from the Chinese media, that Russia in Siberia controls historic Chinese land and one day we should take it back. That puts the fear of God in the Kremlin, because that's ultimately the argument they made about Ukraine. So if they can make it about Ukraine, then the Chinese could plausibly make it about Russia. I think the Kremlin is naturally quite worried about actually trusting China, and it certainly doesn't want to be left as the second in command. It wants to have a say over its neighbourhood, Central Asia, and if it becomes the second in command, it basically just gives China everything. So Putin is going to find that incredibly difficult, and there's going to be mistrust. So in 5 years' time, again, it depends on what West we have. The West, we talk about the West is 56 plus countries. They all have their different foreign policies, all have their own domestic policies. We simply don't know in 5 years' time what's going to happen. In 2026, Trump could lose control of the Congress and the Senate. The Democrats could come back. It seems unlikely and plausible at the moment, but who knows? They may. Donald Trump is also 78, Vladimir Putin is 72, Xi Jinping is 72. Let's forget about Kim Jong-un, he's still young, although he is, 136 kilograms, so his heart may burst, but nevertheless. So we don't know in 5 years' time. You assume the average age of life expectancy for a man in Russia is 65. Putin will be 77 by that time. Xi Jinping, also 77. I don't know the Chinese life expectancy for men, but I'm assuming it's not 77. And Donald Trump will be 83. And judging by certain comments he's made and also his walk in Alaska, he seems to be going the same way as Joe Biden. I'll leave it at that. So we don't know what's going to be in the situation in 5 years' time. At the moment, because Donald Trump is in power, America is weakening its alliances with Europe. Europe may finally realise that it needs to defend itself, needs to build up its security. So in 5 years' time, we may see a more securitized Europe, and with Europe I include Britain and the United Kingdom in that. So it could be it will be a different world. Autocrats like to remain in power for as long as possible, mostly because they know that overall very few of them get to die in their bed, like Francisco Franco back in Spain in 1975. Most of them, it ends violently, or they end up in prison, or possibly both. So it isn't something that they really want to do. Most autocrats will be murdered in their beds rather than dying in them. So you want to have immortality. It keeps you in power. It keeps those around you in power as well, because you will invariably, if you can create new livers or new hearts or what have you, you'd also give them to your friends. So Putin has been obsessed by this for quite a while. We've known that he has doctors who go with him on events, particularly in regards to external events, foreign events. He also apparently has a doctor, possibly, who's carrying a briefcase of his excrement, samples of his excrement to check that he's okay. And he has people who taste his food to show and drink, taste his drink, I imagine, as well. So this is very much part of Putin's playbook. Xi Jinping, again, has, like Putin, a messianic perception of where he is in the world. And so I imagine, and having changed China, because traditionally in the past, China, if you serve 2 terms in a position, you reach the age of 65, you retired. Xi Jinping has decided to overturn the apple cart. He's now 72, still in power, and he will probably be in power for quite a while. Kim Jong-un, 41, still got plenty of time, but North Korea is a dynasty, and so he wants to remain in power as well. So whilst he didn't say anything, it seems he was very interested in the idea. So that's where we are, I think, in regards to this. Putin has a playbook. Putin has, has skin in this, and has for a while.